Hi, I'm Larry Magid, CEO of Connect Safely, and it's my pleasure to speak with Dr. Mitchell Prinstein, who is the Chief Science Officer of the American Psychological Association. Dr. Prinstein, we see a lot on the news and frankly a lot on the internet that can be very disturbing. And you can almost ask this question anytime, going back to 9/11 or before, and certainly with some of the shootings and beatings and other horrific images that we've seen on video. How do you talk to younger and older kids about what they're undoubtedly seeing?
The world is getting scarier, and whether we want to or not, kids are being exposed to scarier and scarier images. It's true. I think it's very important that we talk with kids about their own level of safety, primarily, when they see scary images, to help them understand why what they're seeing online is highly likely or less likely to happen to them. Because kids' fundamental issue is going to be their own personal protection and whether they can still rely on adults. Second, however, is the opportunity to really use these images, if kids are exposed to them, to talk about the world, to talk about values, and to help kids to understand what they might do in a similar situation. So they have a safety plan for either their physical protection or a psychological safety plan to know how to cope with stressful events.
So there's a term in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads, which is one of the reasons, we don't see headlines about planes that land safely. We see headlines about the very few that crash. So it is absolutely true that as horrific and as increasingly common as some of these events are, they're still relatively rare, statistically rare. But how do you get that across without minimizing the fact that while they're rare, they do happen? And, nobody expected to be a victim who, in fact, was a victim of some of these horrible things.
I think exactly as you're saying so. Letting folks know that there are horrible things that happen. We think very deeply and care about ways that we can make an impact to limit the likelihood of those things happening. How can we play a role in helping others to be safe? And at the same time, the chance of it happening to you is whatever, high, low. What are the reasons why you think that? Really help kids to understand. Younger children will have a harder time understanding the nuances or the probabilities of it happening. So we often will just say, I promise everything will be okay. And that makes sense for very young children. But as they become 11, 12, and older, it's important to be very honest with them about the ways in which we understand risk and how to live through risk or minimize that risk.
Yeah, and I was going to say to minimize them both by preparation and also by support systems. I mean, obviously, there's only so much you can do to support somebody if they're in a horrific, violent situation. But what about that notion of, knowing that your parents are going to be there or your family or someone is going to be there for you?
I hope that lots of parents are engaging in safety plans. What would you do in this situation? Or who's okay to pick you up if it's not your parents? So that way kids know, even in a situation where things were unusual or unexpected, they have a roadmap of what they're supposed to do that will maximize their safety. And that helps kids feel a sense of control, that even if something happened that they can't imagine today, they know what would likely be the case, who would knock on their door, when it's okay to answer that door or follow somebody, a friend, a relative, if they needed to. And that is really helpful for kids to feel secure about.
What about equity? We don't all face the same risk. There are certain groups that seem to be at much higher risk than others.
We are starting to see concerns about violence that might be directed disproportionately to people from some cultural or racial backgrounds compared to others, or with some identities compared to others. And that is an acute concern that kids might have to cope with being unfairly or accidentally targeted by others simply because of who they are or a misunderstanding of their own behaviors. And that is a concern.
Any final general advice about how parents can talk to kids about what they're seeing on the news and on the internet that could be very disturbing?
I would say generally that it's really important that we have an open dialogue with parents and kids together about some of these issues. Too often, parents will think, maybe I'm protecting my child by not bringing up an issue or not talking about it. I don't want to scare them by raising the topic. And in many cases, kids are already aware of the topic, and would actually love to have a conversation that feels safe with a parent about these possibilities. So by raising it, you're actually doing your child a favor by bringing to the fore something that they otherwise might be scared of because it feels unsafe to bring up out loud.
I was going to ask, I mean, for example, sometimes when our kids were young, we might have had CNN or some television station in the background and they're going to hear the news. Is that a bad idea? Should we try to shield our young people, or are they going to find out anyway on the internet whether or not? I mean, most kids aren't going to watch CNN, but they going to be exposed anyway? So, how do we handle that sort of effort to shield them or not effort to shield them?
I think it completely depends on kids' age, and I think that before 10, it seems that we do a relatively good job in schools with TV channels and internet sites that are geared towards young children of shielding kids, and that's probably a good thing. But as they get older, we have to recognize, despite our own best efforts, they're probably getting exposed to some of these things. So we probably want to be talking about it.
Dr. Mitchell Prinstein, the Chief Science Officer for the American Psychological Association, thank you so much.
Thank you.